good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. We're almost at noon, so I appreciate everybody being here. Welcome to our panel. We're very excited to talk to our Babson celebrity, Aron Schwarzkopf. Can you?
Schwarzkopf.
There we go. I did practice it before, but it's probably the nerves are getting me, arbitrating me. But anyways, happy to be here. Aron is a Babson alum, class of 2010, and he is one of our best role models. So thank you, Aron, for being here. I'm going to introduce him a little bit about him. He's a serial entrepreneur with a remarkable track record in the fintech industry. He currently holds the position of co-founder and CEO at Kushki, which is a fintech company pioneering the digital payment solution across Latin America. It started in Ecuador, but it's really grown far and wide beyond, and right now it is valued at over $1.5 billion. So it is also an honor to have a Latin American company growing at that stage. Aron did not start with Kushki. There was another company before, which is Leaf, which was a financial technology company that was acquired by Heartland Payment Systems and is right now traded on the New York Stock Exchange, correct?
Not Leaf, but the people
yes,
acquiring.
yes, exactly, the acquiring company. And so he serves in the, he was elected as Young Global Leader of the World Economic Forum, and he's a mentor to many entrepreneurs in Techstars, MIT Angels, New York Angels, and as I said before, proud Babson alum. So welcome, Aron.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And glad to represent Babson again after a really long time. Yeah.
Talk louder. I think we can.
Can you guys hear me or no? Yeah,
Yes,
they can hear me.
now we can hear you.
Great.
Is there anything that I missed from your background?
No, I think you did pretty good research, basically. So yeah, thank you.
Good, and he does have 3 daughters. So he does handle, right, building a company, running a day-to-day with 3 daughters and a wife. And he currently resides in Miami. So I love that because Miami really has become the capital of, Latin America. We say it all the time, but that's why we're all here. So let's start from the beginning. So, you were finishing at Babson, how many, like 20 years ago? And you were about 20 years old, and you had an early encounter in the payment solution. Walk us through that moment where you notice maybe a challenge, an opportunity. How do you get started in the fintech space?
Yeah, so when I started in 2010, I started Leave. Fintech, the term fintech didn't exist still, and I had no idea about payments at all. I was in Babson in my last semester, and I was really obsessed with trying to connect the offline world with the online world. And I was very obsessed in seeing all of the receipts that come out of the credit card machines and trying to understand if we can use that data for something. So I started Leaf in that way as soon as I graduated from university. And the company then turned into a company that patented and created most of the technology you need to see like the new age POSs here in the United States. So if you've ever seen a coffee shop or somewhere, an iPad looking point of sales, a lot of that has the technology that we invented. And then I stumbled into the payments world through that. But when I started the company, I didn't know that it was a payments company at all. And perhaps one of the lessons learned after I've had the privilege to not only go through it myself, but meet a lot of really inspiring entrepreneurs around the world, you really don't have to be an expert, right, in your field to start a business. As a matter of fact, some of the leading entrepreneurs around the world and in history didn't know anything about the industry where they started their business, right? Famous example of that is Elon Musk today. He started companies in industries he had no idea or any experience on before.
Yeah, I hear you. I believe Elon Musk read like every single book in the library when he was like by the age of 10 or 11 and had to talk to the librarian. So I'm sure he knew something. But then if that's the case, how do you go out and you pitch. We're here on the Launchpad stage. There are many entrepreneurs listening to us. So the first thing, one of the biggest thing is the team, right? Slide, and why you? How can you tackle this project? So talk to me a little bit about that. Then say, I noticed this thing, that opportunity. Then how do you go if you don't have the expertise?
Yeah, so in terms of talent and starting to assemble a team from the beginning, I've always had the same mantra. You have to find people that are smarter than you and sell them into believing to what you're doing, right? So when you're starting a business, you have very little resources. All you have is yourself and the confidence of building something big and a vision, right? So throughout time, that's how I found my first co-founder. He was the first person I hired in Leaf. He's been my co-founder there. And then we started Kushki together as well. And I've had employees that have been with me since I was 20, so for like around 15 years now, in both companies, right? So yeah.
So you talked, I watched an interview, and you talked about Latin America as the promised land. Again, being that we're all in Miami, we understand the potential. That's not necessarily the case for everybody around the world. So what exactly makes you call it that? And what particular countries in Latin America today are you most excited about in terms of growth opportunities?
Yeah, I definitely think Latin America is the promised land nowadays. It used to be for a really long time on a global stage, a flyover region for most businesses. It no longer is that, and it's starting to have more and more relevance around the world. And the reason I think it's a promised land, for many of you that live either here or in Europe, most of the developing world or the northern hemisphere is starting to have a lot of population problems, right? So most of their population and demographics are aging, right? You have a lot of boomers, right? Usually the majority or a big chunk of their population. And Latin America is the opposite. It's actually it has the best demographics for you to start a business or for the future. That's why I think it's a promised land. So in Latin America, about a quarter of Latinos are Gen Zers, and about another quarter are millennials. So more than half of the population is 40 and younger, right? So if you match that with entrepreneurship and innovation, it is the promised land, right? You have the best consumers you've ever had in history, right? That are digitally connected, that are educated, that have access to pretty much any knowledge or technology that you need today with a cell phone, right? So I think Latin America is the best market to start businesses now because of that demographic, right? And that's one of the reasons we started Kushki. So Kushki is my second company. When I was 26 years old, I found myself bored after I sold my first company in New York. And believe it or not...
What a great problem to have, right?
Thank you. But believe it or not, we decided there to do the opposite of an American dream. We decided to go for a Latino dream, right? Where we were 26, we had created not only wealth, but some sort of a career for ourselves in the United States by being successful technology entrepreneurs. And we decided the opposite. We decided to basically fly back to our native Ecuador and start a company there, right? Because we knew that it was a promised land. And the funny thing is now Kushki is it's probably like it's going to be probably 50 or 100 times bigger than the first company that I did in an American dream in the United States, right? So we went back to Latin America to build Kushki, and I do think that Latin America has an incredibly bright future, right? Yeah.
So expand a little bit more about Kushki. Like, what was that opportunity you saw then in Latin America? Because, yes, you were bored, you have experience in the financial. So when you said, when I'm going to Latin America, what was the problem you saw? What solution you built? And what is Kushki today? Because fintech, right? We know it's financial solutions that use technology to obviously fix so many things when it comes to access, efficiency. But for the ones that might not be as knowledgeable about Kushki per se, take us in a deeper dive into what you saw and what you built.
Yeah, so the first thing we saw in Latin America was nothing's built yet, pretty much, right? And you're living in a time where it's very clear to see an old economy that's starting to shrink all around the world, and you have a new economy that's usually powered by emerging technologies. Like, we can do a lot of stuff that we couldn't do 10 years ago as humans, and that we couldn't do 20 years ago, right? And probably in the next 5 to 10 years, like Peter and the other stage can explain, there's a lot of exponential technologies that are really democratizing the access and making things cheap for everybody. And in Latin America, nothing is built yet, right? And there's a lot to be built. And then the other thing that we saw in Kushki that inspired us was to build a new business in the new economy. You really need three things, right? You need to be able to have servers or digital real estate, right, at that sense. And that's a global problem that has a global solution. Today, for very cheaply, you can open an account in Google Cloud or Amazon Web Service. You know, I wish when I graduated Babson that, you know, see how fast things. When I graduated Babson in 2010, you had to buy a server and a rack to be able to host a website, to be able to host an app and whatnot. Today, you can pay probably 100. I don't know. I think Amazon probably gives it for free for entrepreneurs. Basically, you know, within 5 minutes, you have digital real estate. So that's not an issue you need in Latin America anymore. But then you need logistics, and you need a way to easily move money, right? Those are the three pillars to start a company in the new economy, more or less. And we took on the challenge to do that third part. And Kushki for us, and our vision in Kushki is to be a pillar for that. We want to be the pillar in which the new economy gets created on, right? We want to make sure that anybody that needs to move money, be it between themselves or in between a company and a client, right, are able to have fast access, regional access with good technology in Latin America, which is a gigantic task, and it's kind of fun, and it pisses a lot of people off, right? But like we pick Latin America, that it's usually a very restricted, monopolized market in terms of banking sectors all over the place, right? And our job is to standardize it, make it democratic, make it cheaper for everybody. That's pretty much what Kushki does, right? So that's been the vision for us, and the reason we kind of got excited on doing it, because it was like a gigantic challenge, more or less, right?
How many years are you into Kushki?
Kushki is in its 8th year right now, so yeah.
Okay. So in 2 more, we'll be like Emerge, celebrating the 10-year anniversary. So your last raise was in 2022, correct? And it was for $100 million. At that point, your valuation was $1.5 billion. When you went into that fundraising process, did you raise from Latin America, from the US? Did you tap any markets in Miami? Was it New York? What was your approach to fundraising? And can you share any lessons learned during that process that might benefit aspiring entrepreneurs?
Great. So when we started Kushki, we wanted it to be only Latin capital. But it got to a point where we kind of extinguished most of Latin capital. So like most of Kushki's beginning, maybe the first 2 or 3 years until the company was worth around $600 million, it was only Latin capital. So we had some small venture funds that were just starting in Latin America, right? And a few family offices, but all Latinos, basically. And it got to a point the company started growing so fast that we basically had to start taking both U.S. and European capital. So today we have capital from all over the world. We're very proud in a couple things, right? Probably the first one is we've been able to be the first large investment for a lot of funds that had never invested in Latin America before. So it's created some sort of a bridge, right? And now they're investing in more entrepreneurs and more startups around Latin America. And the other one is when we wanted to do this in Latin America, we wanted to put our native Ecuador in the map, basically, right? So when we raised in 2022, it was the largest round ever raised at that point. I hope someone beat me by now. I'm not sure, but like at that point in 2022, it was the largest round ever raised in Latin America. And then the other thing is we were able to coin to be the first unicorn in Ecuador. And that was something very special for me, not because of the unicorn valuation, but because in Ecuador you have this culture that you have in a couple of other places around Latin America where people think that you can't follow your dreams and that it's very, very hard, basically, to do extraordinary things. And I'm actually in this stage today because there's a new Babson entrepreneur, Babson student that sent me an email saying, I'm going to Babson, I'm going to build a gigantic company because, you know, you did it, right? So I'm actually in this stage today because he gave me that invitation. So super happy to inspire that and to put Ecuador on the map, to be quite frank, which is a very, very small country. It's never had, a technology problem before, right?
Yeah, we're very proud of our Ecuadorian alumni community that goes to Babson. So talking about emerging technologies, I don't think there's a panel at eMerge that's not going to touch it, whether you are in the artificial intelligence stage or not. But obviously, it's impacting everywhere. So what are your thoughts on AI and how it might best support the fintech space? And what use cases are you seeing when it comes to Kushkis and your industry?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that in the next 5 or 10 years, we're very lucky as humans that we're going to live a before and after that humankind probably hasn't seen since the discovery of fire, right? That's how big kind of AI is for us and how much it's going to change everything we do, right? To be quite frank. So we're very lucky as humans to be able to see that before and after. I have a feeling if you're having kids right now, they'll never understand what it was after, before this decade, right? From not being able to, they're going to be taking flying cars that are operated by AI. They'll never drive. There's the majority of jobs that you guys thought, our grandparents, even, people today do, will disappear, right? And we'll have new, different jobs. The work weeks are going to change. So AI is probably the most transcendent, it's probably the most significant and impactful technology since the discovery of fire, right? So please enjoy that while you live, and don't be scared of it. I think you have to embrace it as much as possible. In terms of AI for fintech, and I have a passion for Latin America, if you haven't noticed, so speak a little bit about emerging markets. What I'm most excited about AI is most emerging markets have had very elitist financial services in which companies are usually privately owned. They build a bank or a lending platform, and they don't end up offering it to everybody, right? So they'll end up covering 5, 10, 20% of the market, and it's usually because of economics, right? And it's usually hard to underwrite risky people that are poorer, people that are in rural areas, and being able to replace humans and that cost with machines to be able to do super good underwriting in terms of risk, can change all the risk profile of a country like Ecuador, right? They'll be able to give cheaper and better access for the whole population for the first time, right? So in terms of fintech, what really, really excites me in emerging markets is that it's actually going to democratize the access of financial services for a lot of people, because it's going to change the business models, right? Even today at Kushki, which we're, I would say more of a new tech, and we're not as old school as a bank. We have a limit of how much we can reach today, right, in Latin America. And with artificial intelligence, I think those costs are going to plummet, right? And it's going to allow us to build cheaper and better business models for us to get to everybody, right? So financial services should become ubiquitous for the first time in emerging markets because of artificial intelligence.
So let's talk a little bit. You kind of mentioned, the landscape in Latin America and a little bit about regulations. How has that been? Because you're growing into different markets, and that is one topic that really, what would I say, like, worries people that are not necessarily Latino, and say like, oh, but is that every country is different, and if I group them together, they don't all work together the same way. So how have you navigated your growth strategies as you go open in different markets? Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what we decided to do in Kushki was kind of ludicrous, right? So going back, we're in our mid-20s, had success in New York, decide to do something in Latin America that's highly regulated, that the regulators between countries don't talk to each other. Latin America isn't like the States. Like, if you go to Dominican Republic or to Ecuador or Brazil, there's nothing in common, right? Different legal laws, different working laws, different markets, different competitors when it comes to the financial sector. So it was really hard. And at the beginning, it was a gamble, really. It was like, let's go talk to regulators and tell them that they need to open up and democratize. Some of them started working, some of them didn't. And, we've always had this approach of being super progressive, right, with regulators. And to be frank, I've been super shocked because the ones that worked really well and started colonizing all the other ones, right? So we're not in all of Latin America today. We have an excellent relationship that's an educational relationship with regulators that allow us basically to teach them what needs to happen, give them perspective, give them resources. A lot of regulators in Latin America don't have the resources to understand technology, right? So we basically spend a lot of time with the regulators just educating them on all of fintech. Actually, we're only in payments, but we educate them on all of fintech. And as a matter of fact, one of the regulators, I actually think they're probably the best regulators now in the world for fintech. The Central Bank of Brazil started exporting their regulations and their products to different places around the world, right? So don't be scared of Latin America. I really think there's a before and after between the old economies and new economies in Latin America. If you would have asked your father, or if you would have asked somebody 10 years ago if the Central Bank of Brazil would be giving classes to the Federal Reserve here on how to do real-time payment systems and crypto, you would be called a lunatic, right? You know, no one would believe that a Brazilian would come to Washington and teach them about financial technology, but that's happening today, right? So you got to lose those conceptions about Latin America, and especially Latin American regulators just being useless, to be frank, because I haven't found that in my experience, right? Yeah.
That's great to hear. So you talked about basically relationship, and you're building that on the regulation side. As you grow, partnerships are also big, collaborations. Did you leverage any, and if so, which ones?
Yeah, so going back to how we started, we're going to these banks. Each country has 2 or 3 banks. They're not Citibank or Wells Fargo. They're owned by a person, right, usually. And they're all different. The bank in Colombia and the bank in Chile and the bank in Mexico, they all have different owners, different banks. And they've all been used to monopolies before. So we came in and be like, we're starting this. Don't be scared of us. We're not going to disintermediate. Let's try to partner. It worked in some places. In other places, they hate us, basically, right? But what we've done now that we're regulated and have our own 2 legs to stand on in most of these countries is open up the industry, right? So in several countries, we started this in Mexico about 2 years ago, and we allow anybody now, any business owner, to build a payments company on top of us. That was impossible to do in Mexico until we did it. And we're doing the same now in Chile and Colombia and Peru this year, right? Where if you want to start a payments company, or if you're a software company, or if you're, we actually have like a tortilla manufacturer in Mexico that now has a payments and fintech company that we power, right? And my marketing team is going to kill me because that's launching in a video, but we have a tortilla manufacturer that makes tortillas in a state of Mexico and gets to 5,000 or 6,000 retail stores all around Mexico. And now they have a point of sales device. They have a digital relationship with the client where they can procure through that POS device. They can do payments through that POS device. They're going to start doing lending for them with an underwriting model that's not a banking underwriting model, because banks don't reach those business owners. So we provide a lot of access that wasn't possible before in Latin America. And that's kind of our vision, is to create partnerships and create a big spot for entrepreneurs, right? To be able to, easily connect into payments in Latin America, make money on payments. And we have a lot of those entrepreneurs now. Like, I hope we help coin the next generation of unicorns in Latin America that are using our APIs and our technology to move forward. Yeah.
So I actually was not thinking of asking you about marketing, but since you mentioned them, I mean, trust is important when you're dealing with anything with money, right? So how does that tortilla entrepreneur trust you, and how do you build that trust in, again, these communities? What have you guys done, I guess, innovative in terms of marketing? Is it, yeah.
There's a saying in Spanish called picar piedra, which is, taking a little hammer and start, hitting the brick wall, like little by little, right? So that's what we've done. I have some funny stories, right? Because we're like a small startup, in Colombia or in Peru, and we're, competing against the largest banks. So, people don't know if to trust us. At the end, what we do is hold your money and move your money, right? So, trust is in the middle of everything. And we're so good at underwriting. Underwriting is when you check a client, if they're okay, if they're not doing money laundering and whatnot, that our underwriting in Mexico is much stronger than most of the banks. So one of the first large businesses that came and was like, I don't know if I should trust you or not. I try to convince the owner to trust us instead of the bank, do the pilot. By the time we started the underwriting process, he got angry because we actually asked him for financials. And he came back saying, no one's ever asked me for financial statements in Mexico before. You know who I am. So we couldn't underwrite him for like a year because he wouldn't give us his information. And we didn't trust him as opposed to him trusting us, right? So it was kind of funny. You do it little by little. In general, a lesson for startups, it's great to have a big vision, but standing on your 2 feet and walking the first meter and then the next 10 meters is probably the best advice I can give you. From when you're planning your deck, right? Your vision's great, but your vision's out there, and if you don't make it past a month or 6 months or 12 months, just go little by little, right?
That actually take us back to our start and how we were trained, right? So at Babson, we have a methodology which is called ETA, Entrepreneurial Thought and Action. And it really does start with what resources you have at hand. How do you get started with those resources? Take that first step. Once you take it, right, you reevaluate, you analyze what data points you have, what you gain from it. So now you have new resources, and you go again. So I think, not to toot our own horn, but I am tooting our own horn. I think Babson entrepreneurs are great at just, really starting with that first step and adjusting, measuring again, pivoting, and continue. So that makes a lot of sense. So since we're talking about that, and we are an educational institution, I always like to talk about insightful nuggets, powerful information that we can ideally share with others as they're going on their entrepreneurial journey. So how do you believe that your education at Babson influenced your approach to entrepreneurship? And I might be leading to it, by the way, so maybe change the answer. But your ability as well to navigate that fintech industry with its own challenges.
Great. So what did I learn at Babson, basically, that helped enable? I'd say the first thing, I met my wife in Babson, and she's probably the cutest and the fiercest boss lady I've ever met in my life. And without her, basically, and her guidance and support, I probably would have never started anything, right? That's another story for Babson. But I literally graduated Babson. I was dirt poor, and I lived in couches. And I actually lived for some months in Babson after graduation to be able to start my business. I didn't have any money to do anything basically at the time. So I'm very grateful for Babson in general. I'd say I learned a lot of tools and processes and knowledge in Babson, but probably what comes out the most for me of what I remember and thank Babson for was the mindset a little bit, right? So I before going to Babson, as I told you, I grew up in Ecuador. I didn't even know the word entrepreneurship before I got to Babson. When I got there, I realized that I don't know why they picked such a hard word for something so simple in that sense. But I come from a culture where not following your dreams or people having social envy and putting you down is the norm. And that's the norm in most of the Southern Hemisphere, in places in South Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. It's not a yes, we can, right? To the point that, when a national team wins, everybody says, yes, we can, or something like that, and all these countries. So I came from a Debbie Downer culture, right? And being able to go to Babson and learn from professors there and just kind of the whole ambience that whatever you put, your work and effort into, you'll be able to achieve it. And that got me to when I decided to do my first company. When I was leaving Babson, I told my mother, I'm going to start my first company, and I'm going to build $1 billion company in my 20s. And she was like, oh, that's great. I love that you have dreams. Now come work with your father, basically. That's what she told me. So I'm very thankful to Babson that of infusing kind of like a jet fuel of yes, we can attitude and positive attitude that you can do it. And if I can give back, and I'm pretty happy of being here, an invitation of someone that I inspired that's a Babson student, so I'll take that with me forever, right? But if you want to start a company, the biggest limitation you have is yourself, right? And what I learned in Babson is if you put hard work on something and passion, you're going to be able to take risks and get to the place that you want to get to. So yeah.
Okay, and then how do you, everything's changing every day. when it comes to learning, we gotta stay up to date. We believe about at Babson about lifelong learners and being that. So how do you stay informed and continue to learn in this fintech space?
Yeah, it's really hard. So once your startup grows to a certain level, the biggest problem you have is time, right? So time becomes like your most precious thing. So I wish today you have everything in your fingertips. It's impressive. Like you can learn about everything anytime, wherever you are. And I wish I had more time to be a lifelong learner or get to the point in AI where you can actually just inject it in your brain in 2 minutes and know everything there. What I try to do is I have a pretty strict reading schedule, right? So in my calendar, I have blocked off stuff to read books, and once a day, I also am reading on stuff that I'm trying to catch up on. So it's all about organizing yourself, but in general, if you're leading a company, you should be a lifelong learner. There's no other way around it, basically. Right?
Yeah, I do.
Especially in technology.
I love working out, listening to podcasts or audiobooks. It's just like, you kill two birds with one stone. So as we wrap this up, what is your vision for Kushki? And again, it's not, and also your vision for yourself, because you're so young still. You've done so much. I'm pretty sure you could, start another venture. I mean, what's the big idea, I guess, in the next few years?
Yeah, so I'll give you like the vision for Kushki first. Just in stats, Latin America is the fastest growing region in the world where cash is dwindling for electronic payments, right? That's in my industry. Brazil is a great case of that. If there's any Brazilians here, talk to the non-Brazilians. If you're not from Brazil, when you visit, can't bring cash. Like if you want to buy a coconut in the beach, no one accepts cash anymore. It's incredible what's happened there in the term of, again, if you would have asked 5 years ago if that was possible, everybody would be like, you're crazy. Like I'm going to buy a coconut. I need to go to the ATM in Brazil, change my dollars and buy a coconut in the beach. Nobody takes cash anymore in Brazil. So just as a stat, in Latin America, there's about $1.5 trillion that moves every year today, and it's growing about 35 to 40% year over year. That's not in cash, right? So it's credit cards, PICs, transfers, whatever you want to call it. Kushki today is about a $12 billion company, so we're not even 1% of that. Sorry, we're a little over 1% of what moves there. And we've been able to do that in 7 years. We want to be the biggest, right? So for Kushki's vision is to become the biggest and the platform where everybody moves their money in Latin America, right? So Kushki's vision for the future is just continue fulfilling until we get to the vision that when we started the company for. In terms of my vision, I want to help Latin America a little bit more, right? So I would love in the next couple of years to spend more time outside of Kushki doing stuff for Latin America, especially technology stuff, right? And enabling people to have better resources to build technology companies in Latin America. Oh, yeah.
Sounds good. And then last question. What should I have asked you that I didn't?
I think you were pretty thorough, I think it was great. First, an applause for her. She's super sick, and she came here basically just to interview me, so thank you so much for that. No, I think you covered it all, so yeah.
Any last words of wisdom? I got a great brain next to me and great human, so I just want to make sure that we're channeling it.
They told me, kind of message here. I don't know. There's a lot of prospective entrepreneurs here or entrepreneurs in early stages. Probably the best lessons I've had in my life is believe in yourself. You're your biggest enemy when you're an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship sucks. Okay, so you're supposed to feel bad, lose your friends, don't have time, lose your hair if you're a guy really fast. That's part of the gig, right? More or less. But it's very, very rewarding on the other side, right? So keep at it and believe in yourself, right? That's probably the best advice I can give you from an entrepreneur to the other one. When possible, reach out to other entrepreneurs. You'll be super surprised how late-stage entrepreneurs. When I graduated Babson, nobody knew me. I didn't have access to anything. And it was the early stages of LinkedIn where you could actually reply, send a message to a very famous person. They'd reply right at you. I had great mentors. Like, I had mentors that are like very famous entrepreneurs, more or less. So don't be surprised if you can find an entrepreneur that can mentor you. They'll always want to mentor you. It's like an entrepreneurship code, right? So make sure to find one of those for you guys. You know, the ride can get lonely. So yeah, cool.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving back the time, sharing your knowledge and insights. It's been great. I've enjoyed it. I hope you guys all have. And we do have a booth right there. So if you do want to hear anything else about Babson, our students, our other alums, we have 5 Babson companies showcasing in and starting in the eMerge competition. So make sure you stop by because I'm sure that they'll be doing a lot of big things in the future as well.
Yeah, last thing, if you guys want to start a billion-dollar company, get involved with Babson, basically, okay? Yeah, that's good.
Thanks for the plug. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Let's hear it for Carla and Aron. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you.